These are the Unit 6 notes that I'm going to read through. Accent steps. Use during to talk about a non-specific time when something occurs. During is used much the same way as in and on are used in English. Did you know? Equal through sports, the Deaf Olympics. Sports and athletic competitions are just as important in the deaf world as they are to hearing people. Deaf athletes are organized into local, state, regional, national, and international associations representing a wide variety of sporting interests. Every 4 years, deaf athletes and spectators gather to participate in the Deaf Olympics, the international games for deaf players. The Deaf Olympics began in 1924 and are modeled after the Olympic Games, providing the opportunity to compete in an environment that does not penalize or limit achievement due to deafness. For example, starting cues are visual rather than audible, featuring flashing lights rather than the sound of a starting pistol or whistle. Thousands of deaf players and fans descend on the Deaf Olympics, turning the sporting venue into a mosaic of sign languages from all over the globe. As deaf athletes break down attitudinal barriers and compete against hearing peers, the ideals of competition and the Deaf Olympics becomes clear. Equal through sports. Deaf culture note, the football huddle. The football huddle was invented in 1892 by a deaf student at Gallaudet University named Paul Hubbard. Concerned about opposing players being able to see his team's signs and planned plays, Paul used his teammates to huddle up. Quickly, the concept spread across college campuses, and today the football huddle is an important part of the game. The deaf community's contributions to the sport of football didn't end with the huddle. Professional deaf football players like Bonnie Sloan and Kenny Walker, and deaf cheerleaders Mona Vieira and Lisa Fishbane demonstrate that deaf athletes are as skilled as their hearing counterparts. ASL up close, asking, have you? American Sign Language uses the signs to experience and finish to ask questions about whether someone has or has not done something. These types of questions often begin with have you in English, but in ASL, the question is asked without the sign have. Recall that the sign to have is literal and indicates possession of something, so using it to ask have you gone bowling is incorrect. Instead, the concept of the sign to experience asks, do you have any experience with bowling? This is two pictures of two different signed sentences. Have you gone scuba diving? And yes, I've gone scuba diving. Another way to respond to a have you question is to use finish to show you've already experienced what was asked. The signed sentence reads, yes, I've gone scuba diving. To respond negatively to a have you question, use the late sign and the non-manual signal of slightly sticking your tongue out. This combination means not yet or I haven't. The picture reads, no, I haven't gone scuba diving. NMS alert. The sign finish is always accompanied by a specific non-manual signal or NMS. Move your lips as if saying fish. Expression corner. Crazy for and not crazy for. Crazy for and not crazy for are two ASL expressions that refer to a strong like or dislike towards an activity or person. Crazy for reflects more intensity than love it, and not crazy for is less impassioned than hate. The 5 parameters of ASL. Each sign in ASL can be broken down and analyzed into 5 separate features called the 5 parameters of ASL. If one parameter is wrong, then the meaning of a sign can be drastically affected, or even disappear and leave people trying to understand what's being signed. Signing clearly and precisely takes time and practice, and being aware of the 5 parameters can help improve your ASL skills. Number 1, hand shape, me versus my. The hand shape difference between me and my is simple to identify. When signing me, does your thumb stick up? If so, you have a parameter error. Number 2, palm orientation, table versus nonsense sign. Palm orientation errors are easy to make. Is the palm supposed to face up, down, left, or right? Signing while nervous or without practice may cause palm orientation errors. Often these mistakes are big and obvious. Location, to see versus nonsense sign. Avoid location errors in ASL by remembering most signs are made in front of your body in a comfortable location. If your arms feel awkward, it's one sign the location is off. Some signs are directional and are directed towards your body, while others, like to drive to, move away from it. Movement. Number 4, movement. To enjoy versus happy. Movement affects meaning, as seen in the examples. Practice and paying attention are key. If your hands and arms feel awkward or constricted, check the sign's movement for parameter errors. Number 5, non-manual signals. Haven't versus late. Specific non-manual signals change the meaning of a sign. Facial expressions, head nods and shakes, the eyebrows, nose, eyes, and lips all have particular meanings that can be attached to signs. Your non-manual signals will improve with practice and use of ASL. Classifiers. Classifier 5, many people. Classifier 5 is related to Classifier 1 and represents at least 5 or more people engaged in an activity such as walking. The concept of Classifier 5 is more people than can be easily counted, unless you're talking about a certain group of 5 individuals. Classifier 5 can be preceded by a number sign, as seen in the example. The example picture says 35 people are going to the party. Flock to and to go to share a similar concept. However, flock to is best used to describe large numbers of people. Focus, the literature of American Sign Language. Both hearing and deaf people create and enjoy literature, artistic works such as stories, poetry, riddles, and more. The literature of most cultures is written, though cultures that do not use or have a written language also produce a specific type of literature. This type is called oral literature, meaning stories are preserved and passed down only by the act of storytelling. The literature produced by the deaf culture is part of this tradition since it relies on the act of live or recorded storytelling for transmission, even though ASL literature is not spoken but signed. Poetry, ABC stories, classifier stories, hand-shaped rhymes, number stories, narratives, and humor form a highly regarded body of signed visual literature passed down from generation to generation. Focus, the literature of American Sign Language, the major forms of literature of American Sign Language. ASL poetry covers a broad spectrum of genres and topics performed by a deaf poet. Deaf poets such as Clayton Valley and Ella Mae Lentz are cherished for their poetry reflecting the shared deaf experience. Classifier stories, works that use only one or more specific classifiers to tell a complete plot-driven story. Hand-shaped rhymes, works in which the signer tells an entire story using only one handshape, often incorporating meter or rhythm based on the story's plot. ABC stories, using only the letters of the alphabet in a sequence, either A to Z or Z to A. The signer tells a complete story. ABC stories combine elements of classifier stories and handshake rhymes. Number stories, similar to ABC stories, the signer uses a specific number signs to tell a story. Number signs can be made in sequence like ABC stories, numbers 1 through 10, for example, in a challenging pattern, number 7575, for example, or in reverse order. Narratives. Signed in formal ASL, narratives often relate events and aspects of the shared deaf experience, especially humorous tales of being deaf in a hearing world. ASL narratives often highlight deaf history, famous deaf persons, and deaf accomplishments or triumphs over adversity. Don't confuse the signed literature of American Sign Language with the plays, poetry, and novels written in English or other languages by deaf individuals. In addition to ASL literature, which is always performed in ASL, there's a rich contribution by deaf authors to the field of written literature in many languages. Some well-known deaf writers are Robert Panera, Rex Lohman, Laura Searing, Linwood Smith, Gil Eastman, Bernard Bragg, Eugene Bergman, Douglas Bullard, and many others. Have you read any works by these or other deaf authors? Classifiers. CL Bent B. Seated position. Classifier Bent B represents a pair of human legs in a seated position, animals and insects. When using classifier Bent B, it is essential to remember eyes on ASL 11, see page 194, because the classifier doesn't distinguish between sizes of animals or insects. Refer to Unit 10 for animal signs. This picture below says, "My dog tends to jump on me." Classifiers. Classifier B and base B. Flat objects. Classifier B represents large flat objects. See page 193. When classifier B is used as a flat surface and other classifier placed on top of it, it becomes classifier base B. In addition to flat objects, classifier B provides a bird's eye view of objects normally shown with classifier 3. Use classifier 3 when describing a vehicle in which you are not involved, but use classifier B if you are a passenger or driving the vehicle. The pictures below say the one on the left says, "I saw a bug crawling on the table," and the one on the right says, "I don't like driving on winding roads." Accent steps. You can use classifiers to describe actions of a boat in addition to the boat sign. Pair classifier 3 with classifier base B to show the action of a boat seen from a distance, or use classifier B for a first person or bird's eye perspective. The picture on the left is the sign boat. Deaf Culture Minute. Did you notice there are two different signs for poetry? The two signs differentiate between poems produced by hearing culture and those produced by deaf performers. Over the years, deaf poets felt the general sign poetry did not fully capture the depth of expression that is part of ASL poetry, and eventually the sign "express myself" or "let it out" became known as ASL poetry. ASL up close, past, present, and future. The ASL tenses. All languages have a way of talking about present, past, or future periods of time. Distinguishing periods of time is called tense. In ASL, tense is formed by the addition of certain signs called tense markers to the beginning of a sentence that is then understood to be in the past or future tense. If there are no tense markers, then the sentence is in the present tense. The ASL timeline diagram illustrates how tense is formed in ASL. This timeline divides your signing space into 3 regions: the present, past, and future areas. The picture in the middle shows the American Sign Language timeline and shows how signs that move behind the signer represent the past tense. Just a little bit behind shows ago. Even further back shows distant past. A lot closer to the body shows recent past. The space directly in front of the signer is the present tense, now. And then the space that is signs that are in the space ahead of the signer are the future tense. So closer to the body is the near future. Further out is the distant future. Tense markers for the past end their movement towards or over the shoulder, while those for the future tense complete their movement ahead of the body. The further back or forward a sign is completed corresponds to the length of time into the past or future. Eyes on ASL number 13. Tense markers are generally located in the beginning of a sentence. Absence of a tense marker indicates the present tense. Tense markers may include days of the week, time signs, ago, and will. I want to know, how do tense markers work? Look closely at the parameter changes in the signs yesterday and tomorrow. The beginning location of each sign is situated on the present tense area of the ASL timeline, but the final locations differ. Yesterday moves toward the shoulder, forming the past tense, and tomorrow moves ahead of the body, forming the future tense. Once a tense is formed, you don't have to keep adding the same tense markers because the context is clear. However, when you change tenses, you must use a new tense marker. Signing in the past tense. Signing in the past tense requires at least one tense marker. Past tense markers may be included in a sign or they may be independent. One of the most common past tense markers is ago. The signs last month, last week, and last year can be interpreted as a month ago, a week ago, and a year ago. Sign used to say when I was. Signing in the future tense. Similar to the past tense, the future tense relies on tense markers. Many signs, such as next week or next month, include tense as part of the sign. Being familiar with these signs will enhance your command of ASL. The Rule of 9. You already know and use parts of the Rule of 9, an important feature of ASL grammar. The Rule of 9 combines the base meaning of a sign with a specific length of time to form a new meaning. In this dialogue, can you identify which sign uses the Rule of 9? The Rule of 9 is a pattern that influences a concept's duration or how long something lasts. It is used when signing about a specific period of time or age. This period is included with the base sign so that the difference between week and 9 weeks is the incorporation of the number 9 into the dominant hand. Only numbers up to 9 may be incorporated into a sign. Look at the examples below to help you understand this concept. You use the Rule of 9 with age, specific time of day, specific number of hours, specific number of minutes, specific number of days, specific number of weeks, specific number of months, specific number of money. See Unit 9. Using tense with the rule of 9. Incorporating the rule of 9 with tense can be confusing. There are several exceptions to the general rule that take time and experience to learn. Whether using the past or future tenses, most incorporate the duration, base sign, and tense simultaneously. Look at the examples using week. Do you see how the signs incorporate tense and rule of 9? The pictures on the right are 1 week and 2 weeks are on the top, and then below is 2 weeks ago. Durations longer than 9 must add a separate tense marker indicating the past or present tense. For the past tense, the tense marker goes after the duration. For the future tense, the tense marker precedes the duration. The top picture on the right says 12 weeks ago, and the signs used are 12 weeks past. The picture below that says in 10 months, and the signs used are future 10 months. Some exceptions include days and years, which include parts of tense and the rule of 9, but not every number. For now, learn and use these signs. The signs are 2 days ago and 2 years ago.